And so our final testimony, and appropriate, we go out with a movie. And I want to say before this, Frank, just looking at you right now, it's been a pleasure. We've known each other for 20 years, but we had a blast sticking it to fascism for the last month together. So I just really enjoyed this work with you.
Oh, same here, Rachel. Thanks for letting me be part of it. This one of the most amazing things I've ever been part of. This is historic.
It's wonderful. Thank you for helping so much to make it happen. And so we will, just so you know, I mean, we will maintain the mics open for a little bit, conversation for whatever, but it's the formal part will be done after John Hankey's film. And so I am going to introduce him. John Hankey also submitted testimony 3 years ago for the first Cold War Truth Commission, and it was very good then also. So John Hankey is a former history teacher who is also a filmmaker and director and writer. Films he is known for are Dark Legacy, Legacy 2, and Is Trump for Real? Take it away.
My name is John Hankey. I taught history for 30 years to the best kids in the world, but history's always been my thing, and now I make documentary films. I'm going to try in 5 minutes to give a 30 million year background of the Cold War. Ready, set, go. 30 million years ago, the global weather at the time fostered a world that was covered with forests, and those forests were filled with monkeys, all kinds of monkeys, and apes, massive ones like gorillas, less massive ones like chimps, but our ancestors were the only ones who could survive outside the rainforest because our ancestors shared. Richard Leakey and a host of other paleoanthropologists have devoted their lives to proving this point. Owen Lovejoy, my favorite, points to the fact that we and our ancestors have a lot more sex than all the other apes. It's one of the main differences, and Lovejoy argues that this is probably why our species shares. Regular sex fostered, selected for, permanent relationships, love and sharing were selected for, and as a result of the parents sharing with each other, the kids survived, and our species survived in areas where no other ape could survive. Upright walking on 2 legs evolved and was selected for because, and only because, it freed our hands to carry more food home to our loved ones. Without question, the sharing of food has always been fundamental to all human societies for the last 20 million years at least. Our very complex, interdependent communities led to a much higher survival rate for the children, and fostered the development of language, and fostered the development of human emotional responses like sympathy and love, all of which fostered the vastly successful sharing behaviors which allowed our ancestors to thrive in hostile environments where no other ape could hope to survive, much less thrive, for millions and millions and millions of years. Tribes were the principal social organization and endure today. Our ancestors eventually stumbled upon the domestication of fire, which allowed them to move out of Africa. And then they stumbled upon agriculture, which led them to develop villages, settled communities, but with sharing and cooperation and love at the very center of everything, of all human activities. 10,000 years ago, there were cities of 10,000 people, with no palaces or mansions. Everyone shared, no rich and no poor. And then something happened. Climate change, probably. If you're a hunter-gatherer living on a relatively uninhabited planet, and the climate changes, you can go wherever you need to go to survive. But if you have a city of 10,000 people, and then suddenly it doesn't rain for 20 years, it's a very, very serious problem. And this may have caused the disaster that led to the breakdown of the communal tribal principle of sharing, of the whole community committed to the good of all, that had guided our species through 20 million years. Some unknown cancer led to the development of societies ruled by stingy, murderous monsters who preyed on innocent communities, predator societies like the Athenians and the Israelites. Jesus and Buddha and Muhammad all reacted to this horrible change. They reacted to this move toward brutal selfishness by leading their followers to treat each other like family. Hell, the Founding Fathers found themselves pretending to be communists, saying we should all work together for the benefit of all. They certainly were not promoting government of the rich, by the rich, for the rich. My point is that these ideas that governments should serve the interests of everybody in society, especially those most in need, the idea that all members of society should look out for all members of society, these are ancient communist ideas. They are also absolutely basic to what it means to be a human. And the anti-communism of the Cold War is anti-human, reptilian even, as well as fascist. Government of the people, by the people, for the people, on the other hand, is a communist notion. Here's some stuff about Roosevelt you probably didn't know. Before sending England any war aid, Roosevelt forced Churchill to sign the Atlantic Charter, agreeing that all people have the right to choose the form of government under which they will live. In other words, Roosevelt forced Churchill to agree that England had to give up its colonies. Looking at the previously secret Yalta agreements, Eric Alterman has exposed the lie that we have always been told about Russian aggression in Eastern Europe. At the end of the war, Roosevelt and Stalin both had to decide how to prevent the losers, the fascist countries, from returning to fascism. And it was agreed that the U.S. would take responsibility for France, Italy, Western Germany, and Greece, and Russia, which had lost 26 million people fighting these fascists. Russia would make sure that it had friendly anti-fascist governments in place in the country along its own borders. There was no Russian seizure of Eastern Europe. It was agreed. And there is not, and has never been, any evidence that the Russians ever had any intention of expanding westward. But Averell Harriman rushed from Russia to the United States the instant Roosevelt died and began filling Truman's head with the lie that the Russians had seized Eastern Europe and wanted to invade Western Europe. Alterman says Harriman was acting like he knew Roosevelt was about to die. How did he know? But now meet Archimedes Patty, the head of U.S. military intelligence for Vietnam.
We had instructions from the White House, from President Roosevelt through General Donovan, not to assist the French in returning and recouping their former colony.
Roosevelt not only forbade anyone from giving arms or help to the French, Roosevelt made clear that he felt that the French needed to be thrown out. Donovan, the head of the OSS, told Patty to go ahead and use Ho Chi Minh, meaning to give him and his men weapons and training, which Patty did. Under Roosevelt, the U.S. armed and trained Ho's army. But did you miss that? The U.S. was already using Mao before they started using Ho. Under Roosevelt, the U.S. was giving arms and training to Chairman Mao and his troops. Weapons and training that Roosevelt knew would be used to put the communists in power in China and in Vietnam, as Patty knew that the arms and training the U.S. was giving Ho would be used against the French. In Roosevelt's eyes and in Patty's eyes and probably Donovan's, the communists were the good guys. Kind of a duh. Patrice Lumumba, Kennedy, Malcolm, Martin, Medgar, Fred Hampton, Mark Clark, Fidel, Che, and Kennedy. At several cocktail parties, Nancy Pelosi has said that Cheney killed Wellstone. And don't you doubt it. That's why no Democrat can talk about the deep state or 9/11 or even JFK 58 years after the fact. So, surprise, surprise, Roosevelt's son, Elliot, says Stalin told him that his dad, FDR, was murdered by the Churchill gang. Wait, you remember that part? Averell Harriman rushed from Russia to the United States the instant Roosevelt died and began filling Truman's head with the lie that the Russians had seized Eastern Europe and wanted to invade Western Europe. Alterman says Harriman was acting like he knew Roosevelt was about to die. How did he know? Harriman knew because the American fascists killed FDR. Elliot tried to get that story published in 1946 and couldn't. So he waited 40 years and tried again. Roosevelt died, Truman was lied to by the American fascists and told that the Russians were monstrous aggressors. Eisenhower let the fascists run wild, but then Kennedy came in. Bet you never heard this speech.
Mankind must put an end to war, or war will put an end to mankind. It is therefore our intention to challenge the Soviet Union, not to an arms race, but to a peace race, to advance together, step by step, stage by stage, until general and complete disarmament has been achieved under the eyes of an international disarmament organization, a steady reduction in force, both nuclear and conventional, until it has abolished all armaments and all weapons. And it starts that process now, today, even as the talks begin.
He wasn't kidding. There were real negotiations. In the movie, JFK, Mr. X, the real Fletcher Prouty, talks about Kennedy's plan for peace in Vietnam.
I spent much of September '63 working on the Kennedy plan for getting all U.S. personnel out of Vietnam by the end of 1965.
This recently declassified memo from Maxwell Taylor confirms that Kennedy ordered the military to begin that day, October 4th, implementing that plan. A week after Kennedy forced Taylor to sign this order, Oswald was hired at the book depository. This was Kennedy's death warrant. I don't think there can be any question but that Kennedy was murdered because he planned to end the Cold War. And Johnson, and every president since, has lived knowing that, and lived explicitly with the same threat, that is, knowing that they would be murdered if they tried to change the way things are. So I say, don't just defund the police. That's an important start. But defund the military and spend that budget helping people and the planet.
Well, there you go. And there you have it. Frank, you want to unmute? And
Main man, John Hankey, yeah.
yes.